Hello, welcome to today's On This Day in Tudor History. I'm Claire Ridgway. I wrote the book On This Day in Tudor History, which has served as the inspiration for these daily videos bringing you tidbits of Tudor history info. Okay, today we're going back to the reign of King Henry VIII. On this day in Tudor history, the 20th of April, 1534, Elizabeth Barton, a Benedictine nun who became known as the Nun of Kent or the Holy Maid of Kent, was hanged for treason at the gallows at Tyburn, along with Father Edward Bocking, who was a monk and Barton's spiritual advisor, Richard Masters, her parish priest, Richard Risby, warden of the Observant Friary at Canterbury, and Hugh Rich, who was warden of the Observant Friary at Richmond. So all these people were hanged on this day in history, the 20th of April, 1534. Sorry for any noise in the background. I have come on the roof terrace to get away from building work noise, but it's so noisy, it's travelling. And now we have the bells. But who were these people that came to this horrible end on this day in 1534? Well, Elizabeth Barton had started out as a servant in a household in Aldington in Kent, when in 1525, at the age of about 19, she started to fall into trances. And while she was in this trance state, she had visions which were described as of marvellous holiness in rebuke of sin and vice. So she experienced religious visions while she was in her trances. Now, her local parish priest, Richard Master, was convinced that her visions were genuine religious visions and prophecies. So he reported the matter to William Wharton, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury at the time. And the Archbishop sent a commission consisting of her parish priest, a diocesan official, 2 Franciscans, Richard Risby and Hugh Rich, who I've mentioned as being executed, and 3 Canterbury Benedictines, Bocking, who I've mentioned, William Hadley and Don Barnes. He sent this commission to see Elizabeth and to investigate the matter. The commission was also convinced that her visions were genuine religious visions. Shortly after her examination by this commission, one of her visions came true and was witnessed by a large crowd. Elizabeth was cured of her illness by the Blessed Virgin. Elizabeth then left the household that she'd been working in as a servant and became a Benedictine nun near Canterbury. She continued having these visions, and people heard about her and her visions, and so would make pilgrimages to see this Nun of Kent, who they believed had a direct line to the Virgin Mary. Now, her visions and prophecies at first seemed harmless enough, as they simply encouraged people to live a good Catholic life. So she was humoured for a while by King Henry VIII and his government, and she even corresponded with very important men such as Sir Thomas More and Bishop John Fisher, and she also met with Cardinal Thomas Wolsey. However, things changed when she began to be vocal in her opposition to Henry VIII's plans to have his marriage to his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, annulled so that he could make Anne Boleyn his second wife. Suddenly, this nun who was speaking out against the king's plans, and of course was having people go on pilgrimage to see her, she suddenly became a threat. Now, according to Nancy Bradley Warren, who wrote Women of God and Arms, Female Spirituality and Political Conflict, 1380 to 1600, in 1532, Elizabeth Barton claimed to have been miraculously and invisibly present when King Henry VIII attended Mass on his visit to Calais. This visit in 1532, he went to Calais with Anne Boleyn to seek King Francis I's blessing and support for his union with Anne Boleyn, his support for his annulment of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. So Elizabeth Barton claimed that she was present in the church in Calais, invisible, while Henry VIII attended Mass. And she reported that there an angel denied the king the consecrated host, removing it from the priest's hands and instead offering it to Elizabeth. Elizabeth interpreted this vision as a clear sign that God was displeased with Henry. She also prophesied that if Henry proceeded with the annulment and went on to marry Anne Boleyn, that he would lose his kingdom within a month and should die a villain's death. Now, Elizabeth just could not be left to carry on speaking out against the king like this. There was no way Henry VIII was having this. She was a threat. In 1533, after being examined by the Archbishop of Canterbury, who was now Thomas Cranmer, and allegedly confessing to fabricating her visions and prophecies, Elizabeth was taken to the Tower of London as a prisoner, along with some of her supporters. She was also forced to do public penance and to make a public confession at St. Paul's Cross. But none of that could save this woman. In January 1534, Elizabeth and 13 of her supporters, including Sir Thomas More and Bishop Fisher, were attainted for treason. Attainted means that they were found guilty of treason by a bill of attainder. Thomas More produced a letter that he'd written to Elizabeth in the past telling her that she shouldn't meddle in state affairs, so he managed to wriggle out of the trouble at that time. But Bishop Fisher and 5 others were imprisoned, and 7, including Elizabeth, Risby, Rich, Bocking and Master, were condemned to death. Chronicler Charles Risley recorded their hangings. This year, the 20th day of April, being Monday, 1534, the Holy Maid of Kent, being a nun of Canterbury, 2 monks of Canterbury of Christ's Church, one of them called Dr. Bocking, 2 Grey Friars observant, and a priest, were drawn from the Tower of London to Tyburn, and there hanged, and after cut down, and their heads smitten off, and 2 of their heads were set on London Bridge, and the other 4 at divers gates of the city. Chronicler Edward Hall records the words that Elizabeth spoke at her execution at Tyburn. "Hither am I come to die, and I have not been the only cause of mine own death, which most justly I have deserved, but also I am the cause of the death of all these persons which at this time here suffer. And yet, to say the truth, I am not so much to be blamed, considering it was well known unto these learned men that I was a poor wench without learning, and therefore they might have easily perceived that the things that were done by me could not proceed in no such sort, but their capacities and learning could right well judge from whence they proceeded, and that they were altogether feigned. But because the things which I feigned were profitable unto them, therefore they much praised me, and bare me in hand that it was the Holy Ghost, and not I, that did them. And then I, being puffed up with their praises, fell into a certain pride and foolish fantasy with myself, and thought I might feign what I would, which thing hath brought me to this case, and for the which now I cry God and the King's Highness most heartily mercy, and desire all you good people to pray to God to have mercy on me and all them that here suffer with me. Poor Elizabeth. Was she telling the truth here? Had she feigned it all and caused all this? Was it all a pretense? Or was Elizabeth a misdiagnosed epileptic, or someone with a mental illness? Or was she a fraud? It is impossible for us to say when we don't have enough details, and this woman was alive in King Henry VIII's reign. But whatever the case, this young woman, this nun, became a real threat to King Henry VIII and his government. And Henry VIII felt that he just could not leave her alive. She was going to carry on speaking out against his great matter, his plans to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon and to marry Anne Boleyn, which of course he had done by 1534 anyway. He was married to Anne Boleyn, but she was saying that the kingdom would fall because of him marrying Anne Boleyn. She just couldn't be left alive. So that's what happened on this day in Tudor history, the 20th of April 1534. Elizabeth Barton and some of her followers were hanged for treason. Well, I will be back tomorrow with some more Tudor history events for you. You can click there to be notified, well, to subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to be notified of new videos as they go live. I do hope you're enjoying these videos. Take care, see you tomorrow. Bye bye.